Hey, what's going on, folks? This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, vanguardne.ca. It is Sunday, June 2nd, 2019. I'm Norman James, your host in London, Ontario, Canada, joined as always by my podcast partner in crime, the one and only Michael Piagello in Cheektowaga, New York, USA. Michael, long time no talk, my friend.
Good morning, Norman. Yes, long time no talk, and here from dreary and rainy Cheektowaga, which never seems to change. But there's a lot of Leaf news, and we're now let's see, I think a little under 3 weeks away from the NHL draft. The Leafs don't have a first round pick, but there's going to be a lot of happenings between now and I'd say probably the next 6
weeks. The
weeks.
NHL Combine in your hometown. I know Below is a buzz, but so is Leaf Nation, Mike, with the news that the Marleaus are packing up and returning to California. And Nikita Zaitsev wants to trade out of town. It's burning down all around us, Michael.
Well, the Marleau news doesn't really come as a great shock because if you remember when the 3-year deal was signed, everybody was questioning that third year. Was like, because apparently he was offered a 2-year deal from San Jose, and the third year with the Leafs was the kicker to having him come here. The contract is sort of strangely structured where the bonuses are split into two, but the contract was front loaded, so there was a lot of speculation that the third year was okay, he's going to retire after July 1st, or he's going to be willing to go someplace else because that's when the Leafs were going to run into cap problems. And there's nothing wrong with a sort of a deal underneath the table where that is going on, and I think that is what is going on. He was very non-committal at locker cleanout in April about his future, and then the report last night after Pierre LeBrun reported that there were some talks between the Leafs regarding Marleau and the LA Kings. Nick Kypreos came out last night during one of the intermissions and said that Colorado and Arizona were also potential destinations for the soon-to-be-turned 40-year-old winger. It sounds to me like what's probably going to happen is that the Leafs are going to have to take back a contract in the deal. Now, that doesn't mean it's not somebody who will be useful to the team, but somebody who on the other team they probably want to move on from. It may be somebody with a more term than Marleau, which is not a problem because the Leafs cap crunch is for 1 year. So it's somebody who may have a smaller salary than Marleau, but maybe signed for another year or two. And I know that the guy that Pierre LeBrun and Bob McKenzie targeted and mentioned was Alec Martinez of the LA Kings, because LA is going through a rebuild. He's got 2 years left at $4 million, and apparently the Leafs inquired about Martinez before they traded for Jake Muzzin, so there'd be a reuniting of Muzzin and Martinez, not on the same pairing because they're both left-handed defensemen, but somebody like that. And don't say the word Dion Phaneuf because that's not happening.
I miss Dion Phaneuf. This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty. Alec Martinez, another one of those players with championship experience. And with Patrick Marleau, let's not get too wrapped up in his profile, his Hall of Fame inevitability. He came to the team when the team needed that optical lift. He helped elevate the status of a team that was on the rise and looking for credibility. He did his job over 2 seasons, but he just doesn't have a place on a contending team going forward, considering his age, and we've watched his decline. It's not a miserable thing, not a depressing thing. It's just reality. So if the Leafs can facilitate a trade for the Marleaus back to California where they are based, that would work. And if the Leafs can get something to help their endeavors and their cause going forward, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and it may have to include a young piece as well, or it may have to include retaining a bit of salary. I think the Leafs will try to shy away from that because they're so tight up against the cap. But, I think a lot of people thought, okay, 40-year player, $6.25 million, it's going to be impossible to move him. Well, that that's not the case in the NHL. David Clarkson's contract is going to get moved by Vegas this year because Vegas will be willing to give up a draft pick. The Leafs may have to give up a prospect or something of that nature. Or, as I said, take on. If you look at Martinez specifically, his total amount of his contract over 2 years is $8 million. So Marleau at 6.25, the Leafs are actually taking on more money. It's just over 2 years, and that is something that they can do. So I think there's something there. I know LeBron said it wasn't close to happening, but I think with the mention of it, it'll gain a little bit of momentum. And I haven't explored the Arizona or Colorado scenarios, but I'm sure there are players that they want to get rid of, like maybe Tyson Berry on Colorado, who's got a year left in his contract, but a little less of a cap hit than Marleau, that might be in play that would help the Leafs because he's a right-hand shot defenseman. But we'll
Russia
see.
With Leafs, our boy DJ Olenek. Why the hell would Marleau choose to waive and go to LA if he wants to win the cup? Well, my brother DJ, I think the writing's on the wall for Marleau in Toronto. There are way too many forwards coming up, seething or ready to go. Marleau understands this. It's time to put this cat out to pasture, send him back, make some room for the young cats, right, Mike?
Yeah, I don't think the Leafs would want to be disrespectful, especially Babcock to Marleau. But I think that if he stayed in Toronto, first of all, the cap situation would be a problem. Second of all, I don't think that they would allow him to continue his consecutive game streak if that's an important thing to him. He played much better last year after the All-Star break when he got rest. So, he's a 40-year-old player. That's only natural that a player like that would need a little extra rest to be more effective. So, I don't know about, and we know the Kings are not a cup contender, but we do know Todd McClellan, his former coach with the Sharks, is there. So, and I believe Marleau played at some point with Rob Blake internationally, maybe 2002, the Olympics. I'm not looking at the roster, but he has played with Blake internationally. So there is, and if his family moves back to Northern California, the flight up from from LA to San Jose is a hop, skip, and a jump as opposed to staying in Toronto. So it makes a lot of sense. I think
Patrick Marleau played with Marcel Dion as well. He's that old. Paul Zhang wants to know the chances that Marleau actually gets traded. I think they are pretty good. What's going on with Nikita Zaitsev? He wants to trade now too. Is this a prima donna move, or does he see the young cats coming up from the Marlies?
No, I don't think it has to do with Liljegren or Sandin or feeling any pressure in the organization. I mean, everything stated personal reasons with Zaitsev. I haven't been able to find out what, and even if it was something personal regarding his family, regarding Toronto, I wouldn't reveal it because that's just not something I would do. But I'm curious to find out if it was something regarding his usage over the last couple of years, because that would be sort of labeled towards Mike Babcock. But Babcock has been his biggest defender. He loves Zaitsev. He says, Zaitsev has done everything he possibly can. He loves the minutes he gives him. I mean, the fans, the media, I think have been a lot more critical. His request to a trade puts the Leafs in a bit of a pickle in the sense that now everybody knows they're trying to trade him, because I think they were trying to trade him before the deadline. There was some talk about them trying to open up cap space for Jake Gardiner. In this situation now, everybody knows he's requested the trade. Now it sort of puts the onus on the Leafs to try to get it done. Doesn't guarantee that it will get done, because if you remember, the last defenseman who had term left in his contract who was asking for a trade was Travis Hamonic when he was with the Islanders. It took him almost 2 years to get that deal done because they couldn't get an adequate return. And I don't know whether, how much the door will be beaten down by NHL general managers for Nikita Zaitsev with 5 years left in his contract. It may be necessary. I know there are some teams interested. I was told after the deadline that it probably wouldn't be a problem to move Zaitsev. But again, with 5 years left, they may have to take something with term back. And they don't really want to do that because they want to open up the cap space.
TC at Wine Mixers. Wonder how his Saturday night was. Last week, you guys talked about the big fish on D. I'd be interested in hearing about how the Leafs could or could not improve the right side D. by making small upgrades on what they had, Hainsey, Zaitsev, and the injured Dermott. I don't like anything having to do with an injury and my boy Travis Dermott, but I'm just going to have to deal with it because I'm sure he's dealing with it and wants to get it over with.
Yeah, right now the picture is very convoluted when it comes to the Leafs. I think that the news of Dermott and his injury, of Gardiner and his likely departure in free agency, and now Zaitsev requesting a trade are probably the happiest news that Ron Hainsey could get in terms of having leverage to get another year on a contract. But then I don't think that's sort of a stopgap. And I don't think that there's a avenue of improvement there, but they may have to go back there because Hainsey works well with Riley, and it's a short-term fix. It's the question of whether they have to pay him $3 million like they did last year, whether he'll hold them up for more money. Because I don't think there's anybody out there who's going to pay Ron Hainsey any more than $3 million. And I think in a perfect world, the Leafs would like to get him at say 2 or 2.5 at the most. But if we're talking about, they're being in that situation where they're losing 3 defensemen and maybe they get somebody back. I mean, we heard the talk a few weeks ago about Colin Miller in Vegas who might be available. They're ideally going to bring other bodies in, but to my mind, I think all this news makes the likelihood of Ron Hainsey returning.
Is there not a bingo game calling Ron Hainsey's name? Seriously.
Well, yes. I have nothing against him. I think he's a decent player. I just have a problem with him playing 23, 24 minutes a night. If he was a 16, 15-minute defenseman playing on the bottom pairing with Timothy Liljegren, he would be a phenomenal asset. But the problem is that Babcock trusts him over other players and uses him more and more. And the guy will be, I think, 38 going on 39 next year. And you just can't do. He's not Zdeno Chara.
On HockeyBuzz.com, front page, Sabres interested in our buddy Jake Gardiner. The Leafs and Jake Gardiner have split, right, mentally. I mean, that's it for them, considering the Leafs' uncertainty on defense. We're not going to see 51 back in Toronto, right, Mike?
Well, it's funny because whenever Gardiner and the Leafs get referenced right now, I know Pierre LeBrun in his notes on The Athletic a few days ago said the Leafs would love to bring Gardiner back, but it's a long shot because they know what Gardiner is going to get in free agency, and they simply can't afford that. If they clear Zaitsev's $4.5 million, they have to take nothing back. If they trade him for a 7th round pick, and I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, then there might be a possibility of them being able to get Gardiner signed on a long-term deal that may not be $6 million. They defer the money later or do something with signing bonuses or something like that, and maybe it's possible. But I don't think that's a likelihood with Zaitsev, and I think that Gardiner, I know that he has felt the pressure of the Toronto market, and he should because of his propensity for giveaways over his career. I'm not saying he's not a useful defenseman, and they recognize that. He can rush the puck. He can be a power play guy. They like him. He's a good personality. I get all that. But in terms of the team on the ice, I think it's time to move on, but they have to think of the here and now and how to replace him, and that's the tough problem.
So Zaitsev wants out. Dermott's injured. Gardiner is an outlier, a potential option to return. Our buddy Dude Blaine on Twitter wants to know if Dubas is gonna need to pull a rabbit out of his hat this offseason to improve the defense, because where we are right now, I mean, the challenge also presents opportunity, but man, there's a challenge ahead. And the last thing I think this team, and certainly the fan base, wants to see for 2019 and 2020 is a slight regression when compared to 2018, 2019.
Well, I mean, Yeah, I mean, right now the defense is the chief concern, and again, it's can you address your needs on defense with your excess on up front, especially on the wing. Bob McKenzie said yesterday the only untouchables on the Leafs right now are Matthews, Tavares, Morgan Riley, and if and when he signs, Mitch Marner. That even guys like Freddie Anderson with 2 years left in his contract, but I seriously doubt that. And William Nylander, who I'm full in favor of moving because I think if you have three $11 million players, you can't afford a $7 million player. And I think you can get your top four defensemen in a Nylander deal, but everybody else is on the block. Everybody else can be had for the right price. And it's up. I really think, and there's somebody asked this question on Thursday to Dubas, and I really think that this is going to be something that influences him. And I think he said as much, is that he saw what Masai Ujiri did with Kawhi Leonard, the DeMar DeRozan deal, saw, the gonads that it took to make that deal and the positive reaction that it had to the team, and said, okay, I can't sort of like take these guys off the table because they're good or because they like playing in Toronto. It says I have to think of this team being able to win and what they need. And obviously what they need and what they haven't had over the last few years is a top pairing defenseman to go along with Morgan Riley. If you can get that, then I think this team vaults to the level of Boston and Tampa Bay and Washington in the Eastern Conference. And I don't think it's going to be Doughty because he's too expensive at $11 million. But I keep coming back, and this is just me, and this is not a rumor, and this is just my feeling.
Yes.
PK Subban at $9 million.
I love PK Subban. I don't care. I just love him. I'd love to see him in a Leafs jersey, but just for fun, right?
But, I mean, the only thing you have to worry about in that respect is Mike Babcock does not like PK Subban in the way he plays. But honestly, I don't think that would stop if that was the only reason that would stop Kyle Dubas from trading for PK Subban. But I haven't heard any legitimate PK Subban to Toronto speculation. And, I've heard Vancouver with him. I've heard a few other places. But to me, that would sort of be a good fit. But
you think PK Subban wouldn't love to come back to Toronto where he spends most of his time and play for the Maple Leafs? That cat knows what the big stage is about, Mike, and he'd love to come on the big stage and do his thing. We know that. Kyle Dubas knows that. Mike Babcock probably frets that. But talk about doing something incredibly dramatic to seismically shift the fan base's hopes and dreams, and who knows, maybe even fracture it more in terms of where it believes this team should be and who should be fronting it. But that would be incredible, and I would go nuts. And we'd podcast all the time if PK Subban were brought to the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind getting a few skiing lessons from Lindsey Vonn. It would be nice to see her around the rink. But yeah,
cool down. Sunday morning, we're subdued. Just real quick on Twitter, Robert James, are the Leafs doing a disservice to Marleau by trying to trade him? Is this largely fueled by the media and fans who do not value his role off the ice? He's taken all of the Christmas photos he can with Marner and Matthews and the family photos and the uncle-dad role. He's done his time doing that off the ice. He's chipped in on the ice, too. It's time to let that guy slip into a warm bath and end it. And the Leafs need to open up that space to bring in some younger players, right, Mike? I don't mean to double back here, but I want to include all of the OGs and everybody who wants to contribute to the podcast into this podcast.
I think in a few years, if the Leafs win a Stanley Cup, that Patrick Marleau will be somebody that they have to thank, because him coming in for 2 years, providing, that example of how to be a pro and just being a good guy and being a team leader, I think it has been invaluable to Marner and Matthews. And I mean, it's at the point now where it's not a disgrace that, at the age of 40, that his skills have started to slip. And again, I think that there was an unwritten agreement, and I don't know that there's probably no way that we'll ever be able to confirm this, but I think there was an unwritten agreement on that third year. They paid him for the third year. That was different than what he was getting out of San Jose. But I think that there was some flexibility that was sort of handshake agreement between him and Lou Lamoriello and the Leafs that is in the third year we may have some cap problems, but we you about where you want to go. And, by the destinations that have been rumored of Arizona, Colorado, and LA, those aren't bad places to spend a year to end your career.
And we need to make room amongst the forward core for one Jeremy Bracco and possibly Mason Marchment, Mike. I'd be so excited to see those guys get a crack in training camp, a legitimate crack, and actually make the team. I mean, talk about throwing another wrench into the Leafs' glut of offensive talent. But heck, I'd love to see it, and let's see what Mike Babcock can do with that young talent, because you know what? It's put up or shut up time for that guy.
Yeah, and possibly Pierre Engvall as well. I was impressed with the way he played during the playoffs with the Marlies, a big, rangy center who's not too physical but doesn't get pushed around, who has the speed to stay up with the NHL game as opposed to Freddie Gauthier. And, let's just say this. It seems to be a fait accompli regarding the comments of everyone looking at the future of the Leafs, that they're going to look for a backup goaltender and that Garrett Sparks is done. Because I don't think, especially in the current construct of the NHL, where both Stanley Cup finalists basically split their goaltenders. I know Binnington played a lot at the end of the year for St. Louis because he was hot, but both of them went basically 40-40, Rask, Halak, Allen, and Binnington. The NHL is going back to not having your starter play 65 games and being spent going into the playoffs. And you need a goalie who can play 30, 25, 30, maybe 32 games. You cannot, and Mike Babcock will not play Garrett Sparks that much because you simply can't trust him. So let's see, Mike.
The Leafs will have a new backup goaltender in time for the next season. PK Subban will be sharing ice time with Morgan Riley. Mason Marchment will provide some toughness on the lower lines for the Leafs. Jeremy Bracco will be in. William Nylander will be traded. Nikita Zaitsev will be on his way out. And Ron Hainsey and Patrick Marleau will be taking a Viking River cruise.
Some of that will happen. Whether I can say all of it will happen, let's see.
Real quick, you got to tip your hat to the Raptors and what they've done, Mike. I mean, you called the Bucks to beat them, and I was hopeful the Raptors would beat the Bucks. And after losing the first two of that semifinal, the Eastern Conference final, the Raptors have just been on fire, 5 straight wins. It's really nice to see. And while Golden State can still put it together and win about a 5th title in 5 years or whatever it is, can you imagine? And let's not bring up the Leafs and how the Leafs celebration would compare. We all know that would be the greatest celebration in the history of North American sports if the Leafs win the cup, and when they do. But to see this organization go from where it has to where it is and where it might be if they can win 3 more games is incredible. It's great for MLSE, and I hope it does light even more of a fire under Kyle Dubas's ass to get things into gear, because I'm sure he understands it's not just about your program and your buddies. It's about winning.
Yeah, no, you have to give full credit to what the Raptors are doing, because it's been amazing. And not to say that this is the only move that made it possible, but getting Kawhi for DeMar DeRozan was a risky move by Masai Ujiri. It's paid off. Even if he leaves, even if they win an NBA championship and he leaves, the legacy that he had in 1 year and the championship that they earned would be, enough. But he also went out and got Marc Gasol at the deadline, and he made other tweaking moves. And I think that it's an achievement. I'm happy for the fans of Toronto if they win those 3 more games. But everything with me focuses back on the Leafs, and I'm just saying, I think that the best thing for the Leafs is if Dubas takes a cue from Ujiri and says, "Okay, I need to win. I need to address the problems that have been clear and apparent with this team for a few years." And that's an example of somebody who went out and did it. So I have to do the same thing.
That's a great way to end this podcast. Michael, it's been a blast. Can't wait to see what the Leafs do as June plows ahead and July 1st is on its way. We've got the draft. We've got free agency. It's all about the Maple Leafs with the Leafs Convo. Michael, talk to you soon, my brother.
Thanks, Norm.
We would like to thank Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, title sponsor of the Leafs Convo, demonstrating passion for the industry and a superior level of excellence in selling, leasing, and marketing your property. Vanguard Northeast Realty.